Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Friday night edition of the program. Our phone number, if you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, feel free. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And there's plenty that we're going to get into tonight. I want to talk about a bunch of different things, but one of the things that I want to bring to your attention, in addition to the double standard in the media and how the Biden administration just brings their heavy hand down on the media that they don't like, or how you can be a better member of your community, or just how important it is to protect our food supply, there's something else I want to talk about. Because today is the anniversary of something that should never have happened, but it did. But before I get into the 1954 attack on the U.S. Capitol, the real insurrection, I want you to hear some wise words from somebody dubbed by El Rushbo as Ronaldus Magnus. That's right, the 40th president of the United States, Ronald Reagan.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. Not too long ago, two friends of mine were talking to a Cuban refugee, a businessman who had escaped from Castro. And in the midst of his story, one of my friends turned to the other and said, "We don't know how lucky we are." And the Cuban stopped and said, "How lucky you are. I had some place to escape to." And in that sentence, he told us the entire story. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man.
Well, Reagan, I think, hit the nail on the head when he was talking about his Cuban friend, saying that we don't have anywhere to go, right? If you're an American, if you're here, this is the last bastion of hope and freedom that there is. Find a freer country. And of course, there's, a handful of lefties out there, some of our favorite callers from San Diego and San Francisco and all the rest of those nice left-leaning places. They're going to call and say, well, sure, no, there's plenty. Look at Scandinavia. Look at this. Look at that. The reality is no, right? The reality is it's not a freer place. These are places that don't even have black people, right? We actually have black people. We have indigenous people. We have people from everywhere. And we get more and more people from everywhere every day because we have an open border. But that's not the point. The point that I'm making is that America is the last best hope for the world in many ways, in many respects. And it was on a day similar today, March 1st, in 1954. That's a long time ago, when 4 Puerto Rican terrorists, they go by the term nationalists, and that's because they want Puerto Rico to be its own nation, and they believe that the United States is an imperialist colonizer that has taken over their nation and doesn't let them live. And the exception or the umbrage that I take with that, again, my parents hail from Puerto Rico, is that this was a Spanish colony and was conquered by the Spaniards. The United States won the spoils of war in the Spanish-American War. So I want to know, and I would love for them to keep their same energy when they, did they protest the Spaniards the way they protest the Americans? Now, it's true that some very, very, I'm not going to say drastic, but I'm going to use that word, but it's probably not the right word. There were some drastic measures that, folks on the island feel were too much, like when this movement by what they call nationalists or the independence crowd, right? They want to be independent of the United States. But the reality is the rhetoric that they use is the same exact rhetoric used by Che Guevara. the henchmen to Fidel Castro. It's the same Yankee go home BS, painting the Americans as the bad guy. Now, I could understand why they may see us as the bad guy, but in this situation, we're really not the bad guy. There may be instances where, people, Margaret Sanger and her people, they went and they did a bunch of experiments on fertility, and women died in those experiments. And I would be mad, too, if a bunch of people from stateside, from the mainland came to Puerto Rico and started killing women. I'd be upset. I think you would, too. But it doesn't tell the entirety of the story. And ultimately what happens is today, and for the last 50 years or more, there's been a very active movement of people believing that they're supporting independence for Puerto Rico, believing that they're supporting their own nation state, when they're really, in my opinion, falling victim to communist ideology. And AOC all-out crazy is no different. Now, you do have to come to a realization, right? At some point, as an American of Puerto Rican descent, one has to ask themselves, do I love America or do I hate America? And if you subscribe to the idea of independence and the notion of becoming your own nation, then you may not like the United States, and you may feel that the United States is just another colonizer. However, I'll repeat, the United States didn't colonize anything. Now, is the United States guilty? Yes. In particular, I'd say Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell has failed to ever allow a vote, and any other leader, when he was majority leader, he failed to bring a vote when the folks on the island decided to vote. And they had 3 different plebiscites, and in all 3 of these votes, these referendums, in every one of them, it was like north of 80% of the people that voted to become a state in the United States, meaning Puerto Rico would pay more taxes and be more involved as a state, allowing them to have state rights like voting and everything else, allowing their resident commissioner, who's their member of Congress, to actually be a voting member of Congress. This is clearly the best, in my opinion, the best option. Now, in recent years, McConnell floated the idea, and it's become very popular with some Republicans, not all, that if Puerto Rico were to become a state, that it would automatically have 2 Democrat senators and a Democrat congressperson or a member of the House of Representatives. I would push back on that and say, where's the proof? I don't see any proof in that, because there's been a number of, right now, the resident commissioner now, Jennifer Gonzalez, she is a Republican. There's been a number of Republicans that have been elected as governor. Even the last governor, might even be the current governor. No, the last governor, right before Pierre Luisi, Wanda Vasquez, she endorsed Trump in his 2020 reelection. And she's not a Republican. But my point is, there's no shortage of Republicans on the island. There's no reason to believe that what Mitch McConnell and AOC want to be true, that if Puerto Rico were to become a state, that it would magically just produce 2 Democrat senators. There's just no proof. Puerto Rico's not as blue as New Jersey. It's not as blue as California. And there's proof to the contrary. So why? Why does Mitch McConnell and those that follow his lead jump on this bandwagon? Well, because it's easy for them. It's easy for them because there's a million different reasons for them to keep things the way they are. It's easy, it doesn't rock the boat, and perhaps there's even a financial interest, perhaps. I'm being figurative, right? Hypothetically speaking. But senators that understand these issues a lot better, like Marco Rubio from Florida, understand that this is not a good position for the United States or for Puerto Rico. The best thing for them, in my opinion, is to become a state. But again, I gave all of that background because today is that anniversary of the attack on the Capitol. And it reminds me of a time that we're living in now. Now, I'm not saying people are going to go and attack the Capitol now and shoot members of Congress the way they did in 1954. It's not what I'm suggesting at all. But I feel that the temperature is similar based on the history. And that's not what we need. So when Reagan says that we have nowhere to go, he's right. We don't have anywhere to go. It's time that we face the problems that we have and take them on. We can't continue to just pretend they're going to go away. That's why we're seeing Biden do what he wants to do when it comes to this one journalist from the Blaze Media. And this guy was escorted out of his office in handcuffs by the FBI. That's why we're seeing Catherine Herridge being fined every single day and held in contempt of court. The amount of liberty that we've lost, when people say, what rights are you losing? Just take a look around. When the media starts getting locked up and held in contempt, when former presidents are being charged and they're trying to jail Trump, and it's not because he's Trump. I mean, it is because he's Trump. But to me, it's not because he's Trump. To me, it's about putting somebody in jail that doesn't belong in jail. You know that we've turned a corner and not in the right direction. So are we seeing a repeat of 1954, of that energy? I dare say I think we are. And we need to hit the brakes and turn it around. Folks, stick with me. We're going to continue this conversation on Biden, the media, and more straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. And there was a story that I woke up to today, and it was interesting because it's a guy named Steve Baker who was released from the courthouse after he was arrested by the FBI. Now, again, this guy is a reporter for The Blaze, a conservative outlet founded by Glenn Beck and then merging with Mark Levin's outfit. And this is what ends up happening to the guy. He was arrested, they're saying, over his January 6th reporting. And it's just interesting stuff here. I think it's out there, right? This is pretty out there. But again, after seeing everything that just happened with Catherine Herridge and her being held in contempt because she won't reveal who her sources are that outed the people, and the FBI were upset about that too. So it seems to me like the FBI is on a little bit of a tear. And it wasn't that long ago that the New Civil Liberties Alliance, a couple months ago, sued the United States State Department for funding and developing and testing a censorship program and technology that they call the Global Engagement Center. So, I mean, it's just alarming, right, to say the least. At least that's my take on it. I want Curtis Houck from Newsbusters, the managing editor there, to join us and give us his take on it. Curtis, welcome back.
Hey, always a pleasure to be with you.
So what's your thoughts on this arrest of journalists and holding journalists in contempt for not revealing their sources?
All right, so the Steve Baker one is really bizarre, because there was like inclinations that he was going to be charged, but according to him, he wasn't sure what he was going to be charged with. And typically when you're the object of an investigation, you kind of have an inclination, at least your lawyer does, of like what you're potentially in danger of being charged with. So that really doesn't make any sense to me, which is not surprising, and obviously in all of this. And so then when you look at like the charging documents, Dave Marcus, who watched Dave, pointed out that like one of the claims that they have against him is during the kerfuffle on January 6th, to put it mildly, he said when he heard that people were going into Nancy Pelosi's office, he said, I got to get that too. And they thought that was somehow incriminating, that he was like up to no good. But you and I know, Rich, and like in journalists, like layman's terms, like, yeah, that means like I got to go get like footage of this, or I got to go see this for myself. Like, or as a colleague was telling me today, he's like, if I saw somebody like do a really sick, like, I don't know, play or whatever in like ultimate frisbee on the beach or something, was his example, I want to take a picture of that. So
right.
This is very confusing because he's like charged with disrupting an official proceeding and disorderly conduct and a lot of the things that other January 6 folks have been charged with. But again, it's just so bizarre. It is so bizarre. So like, it doesn't smell good, and it will, and it clearly doesn't. You just like want more information like from these people. You would think, well, obviously in a perfect world, you'd want the law enforcement to be more forthcoming, our FBI, because, you know, obviously they work for us. But
right.
There's not a lot of details out there right now. So a lot of people are rightfully concerned about it on Twitter. But like, I was trying to find like actual information, like what are the feds saying about this guy? And I was not able to really find a lot about it today. And Catherine Herridge, real quick, we'll dive into more of that. But like Catherine Herridge, I mean, Obama judge, by the way, the judge that has found her in contempt for as much as the David Brookses of the world admired the crease in Obama's pants and admired him surfing back in the day and thought that he, you know, was going to really part the seas and slow climate change and everything like that. Obama was pretty terrible. Like in terms of law and order, like brass tacks, he was not good for journalists. And his legacy of that lives on with Judge Cooper's ruling against Catherine Herridge and her sources inside law enforcement. And I mean, it's say, Catherine Herridge, you think you're having we think we're having bad days recently. Catherine Herridge is having a really rough time. She gets laid off from CBS, and then she gets this ruling. Yeah.
And, you know, I'm glad you brought up the Obama years, because you're right. Obama was extraordinarily unfriendly to journalists. I remember it was this bad. It was just this bad. And you kind of forget about it because, you know, you go through a few years of Trump and then you're back to Biden. It's like, oh, my gosh, we're back in the gulag. But lamentably, that's what it is. And I'm with you. Catherine Herridge is getting put through the ringer. And again, this is it's just fascinating to me. And maybe I'm not the only one, but I feel like the FBI gets away with a lot, right? A lot more than they probably should. And this is something I've seen for a long time. I have a friend who was a councilman in a small New Jersey town, and he was in effect set up by the FBI. And I remember he actually called me, and he said, "Hey man, I need you to pray for me. These people won't leave me alone. They're trying to build a hotel in my town." I told them we can't zone for that, and they just started dropping money into my account. And one thing led to the next, and they surveilled him and they arrested him. But he thought it was the Russian mob. And when they yelled FBI, he said, "Wow, what a relief. I thought they were going to kill my family." And he's like, when they put me in handcuffs, I was like, oh, it's just cops. and just to think that's what people are experiencing when they're dealing with the FBI. So it's not that far-fetched, but it's just unfortunate that we're seeing that. So I want to talk about the media and continue our discussion with you, Curtis Houck. Stick around. Folks, we're on with Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center, managing editor there. Phone number here, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Don't go anywhere. We're just getting started. I'll be right back.
This is a lot of time being spent trying to, I guess, impeach the president at some point here. Is there anything?
Zero. There's absolutely nothing. And the remarkable thing about this 229-page transcript when you read it is how little of it relates to Joe Biden, which is the ostensible purpose of this investigation, which has now moved into an impeachment investigation after with 14 months in the books here.
So that is Congressman Dan Goldman. He's on Morning Joke today on MSNBC. And he says there's absolutely nothing to prove that Biden's done anything. Meanwhile, you have a whole bunch of committees in Congress that are making the case otherwise. And when the Biden administration doesn't like the media, we already know what happens. The FBI comes and they give you a hard time. But when they do like you, it's because you're ignoring the story that's going on. And that's exactly what we're seeing here. We've got this brand new Biden family scandal. And of course, ABC, CBS, NBC, they're silent on this. Curtis Houck, welcome back, managing editor of Newsbusters. What's the story here?
Well, where to begin? I mean, this is yet the latest example that we've documented for years now at the Media Research Center, where every so often, a couple times a year, our Jeff Dickens will do a story saying 8 new Biden scandals, 9 new Biden scandals, 8 new Biden scandals. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on. I mean, just in the latest batch, there were stories a few weeks ago from the New York Post that Hunter Biden's billionaire pals in Russia escaped U.S. sanctions. I wonder why. My personal favorite is a story that Politico put out. Politico, but they buried, even though the story was 4,000 words about how Jim Biden claimed that he was going to get Joe Biden a stake in the company and get him on the board of this group called AmeriCorps Health that was buying up rural hospitals. Mm-hmm. Not surprisingly, it's just like Hunter Biden's life in general, it quickly spiraled and it really didn't go anywhere. It left a lot of rural hospitals in ruin. The company that Jim Biden cut bait from is mired in Medicare fraud scandals for overcharging on tests that seniors didn't need. Politico even alleges that a woman died because one of the hospitals bought up by Jim Biden's group didn't have enough money to pay the bills and have enough, supplies. So, I mean, just the list goes on and on. The testimony of Tony Bobolinsky, and I go back to ones from previous years where multiple Biden family members, not just Jim Biden and Hunter Biden, were receiving large sums of money that correspond to the business deals that they were doing in other foreign countries. So the liberal media are trying to make this huge thing, Rich, about Smirnoff and the Burisma bribery case. Obviously not ideal. I'll be honest about that. But at the same time, we're just like taking one piece, one example, one bullet point off of a list that is in the dozens at this point. So to say that this story has fallen apart is just absolutely ludicrous. And Daniel Goldman, I mean, come on, this is a guy who, when he was an MSNBC legal analyst, came on during the Kavanaugh hearings and said, "I'm here to apologize on behalf of all men," as in the Republicans, for the way they behaved. It's like, all right, beta male, Mr. Levi Strauss hair, one of the richest members of Congress. I mean, give me a break.
Yeah, he's a piece of work, and he was just as robust as Adam Schiff during the Trump impeachment for sure. Now, I'm looking at the piece that you guys have on this, and it seems like there's always a new story coming out about Biden. We have his testimony yesterday. It seems like there's a lot of backpedaling, and just they say, "Well, you did this. Well, what do you mean by this?" That kind of thing, and it doesn't seem to be moving as quickly as we'd like it to. If you had to speculate, where do you think this stuff ends? Do you think eventually there's an actual impeachment of Joe Biden in the House and the Republicans have the votes to pull it off?
I mean, it's just I want to be optimistic, Rich, but I mean, we've learned from some greats over the years, including the great one himself, where it's really hard to have faith in the Republican Party in Congress. I mean, let's just be honest about that.
Right.
And very frequently, I'll say the Republican Party is its own worst messenger. And I think that's definitely the way it works, with the left, the way this worked with Trump and Russia collusion or Trump and the Zelensky call, they really had their story down pat. The message discipline was impeccable from Democrats. Adam Schiff and had everybody rowing the same direction. Whereas with Republicans, we have dozens of examples of Biden family malfeasance, but you can't just go out there with a press conference or do a really cool Twitter thread. That's really only going to get you so far. And I think as time has gone on, this legal wrangling with Hunter Biden, they're trying to run out the clock. I really think that's what they're trying to do here.
Right. Because
they know with a number of redistrictings that have been going on across the country in different states, they're hoping that there'll be a Speaker Jeffries and this will all go away, or the pressure of that, because elections have consequences. Throwing George Santos out has consequences. With a really small House majority, they can't even agree on that Congress needs to, live within its means. I mean, it's just, I feel like it's slowly moving to the back burner, but you never know. I mean, you want to have hope that they're going to turn this train around, but the evidence is there. The evidence is there. Do you honestly, does anybody honestly believe that Hunter wasn't telling Joe what he was up to when he was catching rides on Air Force Two to Romania or wherever? No.
And getting those wire transfers.
Joe didn't look around, even despite his mental incapacitation, didn't look at him and just be like, what are you doing here? I'm flying halfway around the world. Why are you sitting here?
Right. Folks, we're on with Curtis Houck, MRC managing editor, and we're going to continue. Curtis, you guys have an article up here that I'm just dying to talk about with you. It's Joy Reid, and it says, the economy is actually fantastic. Voters are just too dumb to notice. And that definitely sounds like something that she would say. And I want to talk about that when we come back. Folks, we're on with Curtis Houck from the Media Research Center. He's the managing editor over at Newsbusters. Newsbusters.org is the website. Great articles. I've been looking at this stuff for years. And the phone number, if you want to join us, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The challenge for President Biden is that on the facts, the economy is far better now than it was under Donald Trump, who failed in his one job, react to a crisis. As president, you're a crisis manager. He was hit with one big crisis, the pandemic, and flubbed it so thoroughly we're at 14% unemployment. Yet people, I hear people died because, and 1 million people died. Not even some people, 1 million people died because of him. And yet you have people saying, I had more money, I was richer under Trump. Not true, not possible. And the fact that he overcame his own objection to the stimmy, signed a bill Democrats passed to give you a stimmy, then took credit for the stimmy by putting a letter in the thing when you got the stimmy that said, you're welcome, Donald Trump, even though he was against the stimmy. And now you got people in the street saying, well, Trump gave me a stimmy. No, he didn't. Nancy Pelosi gave you a stimmy.
She's such a hater. Again, that's Joy Reid saying, A, that Trump killed 1 million people, and B, that he did not give any stimulus to the streets. You can't make this stuff up. Curtis Houck, managing editor at Newsbusters. This is just classic Joy Reid, no?
Yeah, this is Joy Reid. I mean, if she's not like angry, like raging, she's coming up with insane takes. Like she had this thing during the pandemic where she was saying that like Governor DeSantis and like Governor Abbott and Governor Kemp, I know at least Governor DeSantis, she was saying that like he wanted to like physically make COVID like in liquid form and inject it into like the arms and backsides of Floridians so that they would die or something like that. Like some really cockamamie stuff. And I'm like, what does this woman think about in her spare time? How does she come up with these like weird, sick, like nightmarish fantasies about conservatives? Just this week too, she and Melissa Murray, who's somehow teaches the best embrace of America's lawyers at NYU, came up with this conspiracy theory that Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are going to rule in President Trump's favor and ensure that the majority opinion comes down as such because they want to see Donald Trump reelected so that they can retire, not because they think that the president should have immunity, but because they want to retire, not or
Curtis
because
Houck,
of the Constitution.
This is a big thing right now. The other day I saw an article on a New York blog that talks about, things that have nothing to do with politics, where to go to the best parties, and all of a sudden there was an article there written by one of their writers that, again, doesn't do politics ever. They write about the best places to grab martinis. And they said, should the Supreme Court have lifetime appointments? And I thought, this is the beginning. This is the beginning of an unending attack on the Supreme Court because they already know the Supreme Court's going to uphold the law as it's written in the Constitution. And boom, things are going to go Trump's way finally. And they already see that coming. So now it's time to undercut the court, to delegitimize the court, to attack the court, and just, the court doesn't matter, right? It's kind of like when the Constitution doesn't matter. It's a living, breathing document. Anything they can do to just disassociate themselves.
Right. Notice, folks, when you listen to these so-called legal analysts, notice how they don't really talk about the Constitution. They don't have a reverence for our founding documents. My boss, Tim Graham, and I were on Newsmax this morning. We were talking about how, the left is the one claiming that Republicans are being partisan about this, that Republicans are being partisan in demanding the Supreme Court take up a case of profound importance on presidential immunity. And it's like, who are the ones who are defeating and, obliterating norms here? The President Trump, and, regular people, even CBS's Jan Crawford, who's one of the better journalists out there, she's pointing out the Supreme Court had to take this case. This is why the Supreme Court exists, to hear difficult topics. Because a ruling from the Supreme Court is final. It is not versus a D.C. Court of Appeals where it is one circuit of one part of the country. They may think the same, but a ruling in D.C. doesn't necessarily affect what a judge in California thinks or a judge in Louisiana thinks. Whereas the Supreme Court, when the Supreme Court says something, it's kind of important. So yes, guys, this is all about putting Donald Trump in prison. This is not about constitutional issues. And that's what's the important takeaway here.
Yeah, and it's remarkable to me that whether it's the Supreme Court or the discussion on the economy or anything else, it's just it's very one-sided. And I always try to keep that in mind as I do this show. My views are obviously not in line with theirs, but I will play their clips and invite those people on the show as much as I can to make sure that everybody hears both sides and we can have that discussion. But it seems like there is no discussion, right? Nobody ever invites me on CNN. They don't. Do they invite you on CNN or MSNBC?
No, I was going to say, my boss, Tim Graham, back in the day would tell stories how in the late 90s, early 2000s, he'd square off against Paul Begala on CNN, or our boss, Brent Brazell, would go on Scarborough Country back in the day. I mean, you're old enough to remember it. I remember those days. Granted, I was a little kid then, and I was a weird kid watching stuff like that at, 8-10 years old, but honestly, you think about that. Instead, what you get is cartoonish paraphrasings from Joy Reid and Joe Scarborough, or edited clips, where it's in conservative media, we play what they say. In Newsbusters, we run the transcripts of what they say. And that's what makes us different. Just even on a fundamental level, you can even disagree with our policies, but the way we go about our media ecosystem is so much different from the way they do it. It's this pie in the sky thing where they don't want liberals checking us out. They don't want you listening to this. They don't want you listening to talk radio or reading the Wall Street Journal. Yeah, because they might like it.
Curtis Houck, let everybody know how they can keep up to speed with all the work that you guys are doing at Newsbusters and the MRC.
Yeah, newsbusters.org. We are at Newsbusters on Twitter, at the MRC on Twitter, and I am at Curtis Houck, all one word, on Twitter. Thanks as always, Rich. It's always fun.
I appreciate it, brother. It is always fun, and it's always good to get your take. I love the work that you guys are doing there. Big shout out to you and to Tim and to Brent Bozell and everybody at Newsbusters and the MRC. Godspeed.
Carry on.
All right. Folks, there is more to come straight ahead. We're going to put a couple of calls in before we jump into the next hour. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back, familia. Again, the number 833-4-VALDEZ. I'm going to get to your calls, I promise. But I want to talk about something crazy that I heard, and it's from Congresswoman Veronica Escobar. Now, listen to this. All I could think was, what communities is she talking about? Check this out.
The fact of the matter is immigrants commit crimes at less significant rates than native-born Americans. And in communities where migrants have been bused, crime has gone down. Anyone who commits such a horrific crime absolutely needs to be prosecuted within the full extent of the law. But also the fact of the matter is, when Donald Trump was in office, over 1 million migrants were released. I'm sure that there was a fraction of those migrants who also committed crimes. The issue is not that migrants commit crimes. The issue is we have not reformed a system that is badly broken, and it's been Republicans standing in the way of that every year that we've tried this for decades.
So a couple of things here. Number one, I think she's crazy. What community is she talking about? The community of Times Square in New York City, or the New York City subway system where there's a shooting or a stabbing just about every single day? This lady está loca. She's crazy. Now, listen, it may be very true that the vast majority of immigrants are not here to commit crimes. Now, her idea or her stats, and I'm sure she didn't make them up. She got them from some left-leaning think tank, probably the Southern Poverty Law Center. But when she says that migrants commit crimes at a lesser rate or percentage than native-born Americans, I'll give her that one. I'm not saying it's true, but let's just presume that it is. It doesn't matter, right? If I'm in my house and I break something, that's an accident in my house. I broke something by accident. It's my house, and I broke it. My bad. If you sneak into my house and break something, well, you shouldn't have been here to begin with, so it's doubly as bad. Doesn't that make sense to anybody? Come on, Congresswoman Escobar, you can do better than that. And the idea that the communities where migrants are bused are safer. What planet is this woman on? I mean, is she talking about the communities where they're busing them out? Like what DeSantis is doing, sending them to Martha's Vineyard? Maybe it's safer now in Florida because they got rid of a couple of hundred? I mean, I don't know what to tell you here. All I could say is wherever you have these Venezuelan gangs, wherever you have these El Salvadorian gang members, wherever these people that are coming here for the explicit purpose of robbing things, robbing people, committing crime, knowing they can't be prosecuted, these areas are not any safer. It wasn't safer for Lake and Riley. It wasn't safer for the 2-year-old that was just caught in gunfire. It wasn't safer for the 14-year-old that was just raped. Things are out of control, and it has to stop. We have to have a better community. Stick around. I'm Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere. Hour number 2 starts right now. Live
from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the program. It's our Friday night edition of the program. If you want to join our late night national town hall conversation, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And in addition to what we're talking about with the media and how things are going crazy with respect to the FBI arresting journalists and judges holding other journalists in contempt, there continues to be stories that need to be told and conversations that need to be had, and we're going to do that this evening. And I want to expound on a little bit of what we talked about earlier. We left off with this clip from, what's her name? Veronica Escobar, Congresswoman, who says that the communities that have immigrants bust in are safer than those that don't. And it's crazy because all I could think about was Times Square. And is Times Square any safer where, you know, tourists are getting shot by 15-year-olds who are trying to steal shoes? Not even Trump shoes, but shoes. And it's fascinating to me that somebody would say something so incredibly ignorant. But leave it to Veronica Escobar. I believe her hate of Trump totally blinds her from her ability to be even remotely objective. But putting that aside, it underscores a crucial point, which is community. We have to have a safe community. Without a safe community, there's nothing left, right? I mean, ultimately, it's an extension of your home. Your home is within the community. You want a safe home. You want a safe community, a safe school district, so that you can have a prosperous life for yourself and for your family. And I want to have a discussion on community because one of my favorite guests, former U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Blaine Holt, he is the co-founder of Restore Liberty. And you've seen him on Newsmax, and he's got a great column there. He's on Twitter at The Irascible. But something that he's doing right now is launching a new group. And it has to do with resilience, and it has to do with community. And I can't wait to hear about it, because when I heard about KSRG, I thought, did he buy a radio station? No, he didn't. Those are not the call letters, but we're going to find out exactly what KSRG is. General Holt, welcome back, sir.
Oh, my gosh. It's so good to be back on your show. I love our discussions, and I am very excited about the topic tonight because, you know, as crazy as this world is, we're only going to be okay if we actually invest ourselves in our communities. And if we take care of ourselves, we can't have the mindset that the government's going to take care of us. I think they've proven otherwise. And so I'm definitely deeply invested in efforts across the nation, but also here where I live, in folks who will understand that whether you're left, right, up, down, it doesn't really matter. We've got to be ready for some storms now.
All right. Well, let's jump into this. Tell us about KSRG. What does it stand for? What is it, and why are you involved?
Yeah. So my national nonprofit, Restore Liberty, part of us, we have and we encourage a program called County Guardian, and what that means is that we want to invest and we want to coordinate with counties across America where they understand that they have to take care of themselves, no matter what the storm is. It could be a wild card event. It could be a black swan. It could be a financial collapse. It could be an EMP, illegals attacking, a World War III. It doesn't matter what it is, but it does mean that your local government, if they get overwhelmed, we're all going to be in trouble. So grassroots, let's come together and Let's help each other and let's invest in each other as Americans do. And then here in northern Idaho, where I live, KSRG stands for Kootenai, and that's the beautiful name of our county here, Kootenai. And it's stability and resilience group. And what that means is we're not here to stoke fear or get everybody crazy. We're here to tell everybody that, hey, no matter what comes, we should be resilient in a very uncertain year called 2024. And whether you read the headlines and you get freaked out about World War III, or whether you're worried about the stock market or a cyber hit on our planet or the next red balloon traveling across the nation, we should understand that as a community, we're invested in each other, and our best path to be resilient and to take care of each other is to set up plans and operations in case things do start to break apart. And that for us here, it goes from communications, alternate forms of communications, transportation and logistics. Where are the resources in our county? How would security work? How do we support our first responders and our local governance? And how do we prepare for the longer term so that we're not at each other's throats? It's the opposite of that. We're actually taking care of each other.
I love it. It sounds like a beloved community to me. And folks, again, the Kootenai Stability and Resilience Group is the idea of everybody preparing their county and just being prepared. And, you know, being a Boy Scout isn't a bad thing, right? I think everybody should be prepared, know how to be prepared, right? The best thing that can happen is you never need those things.
That's right. That's exactly right. But our first step is we've gone to all of our churches and we've gone to our volunteer groups in the county, and we've said, hey, you know what? Fill up all your food pantries, fill them all up, fill everything up you possibly can. Because if things get really crazy, well, you know what? If we don't have a monetary system, or if we don't have the ability to barter or whatever, we'll pay people in food. But let's go ahead and get ready on that side of the equation so that that's not a problem. And then that's how we keep our first responders on the job. That's how we keep our power professionals who provide power services to us, our water services. We keep them on the job because we're like, hey, no, look, we're all about keeping everybody together, and we'll handle it as a county together. But the first step is that, and the second step is communications. You know, we just saw that AT&T Verizon outage weeks ago. We had that crazy movie, Leave the World Behind. What if you couldn't communicate? So we're looking at alternative forms. There's different networks, there's radio networks, and we're exploring all of those things so that we can keep everybody apprised of, don't be in an uncertain environment. Here's how you're going to understand and get news and information.
I love it. Folks, we're on with retired Air Force General Blaine Holt. You know him from Newsmax and from his appearances on our program. And General Holt, if people want to implement something like this in their county, what do they do?
Well, what they can do is, if you like what you're listening to and you're like, I'm really inspired, and it's not a political issue. It's not left and right. It's not Republican versus Democrat. This is everybody. I have a gentleman who's leading a group in King County in Seattle, Washington, of all places, who is, hey, we want to be a county guardian program. Can you help us? And yes, we can. So restore-liberty.org, or if you want to look at a benchmark program, which is us, ksrg.org, and then you can learn about us and you can contact us, and we'll share best practices, we'll share information, we'll plug you into networks, and we'll give you a process for how your county can actually harden itself a little bit for the uncertain times that we see in front of us.
All right, General Holt, stick around, because I want to switch gears from this community to the larger community known as the nation. And I want to talk about how the nation's demise is no longer Hollywood fiction. So, folks, stick around. We're coming right back with General Blaine Holt. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our conversation with retired Air Force General Blaine Holt. And the title of his latest piece, The Nation's Demise is No Longer Stuff of Hollywood Fiction. And General Holt, I think this is a catchy title and one that's very accurate. Let's talk about your piece and overall the premise of it.
Yeah, I appreciate you highlighting this. This is a very important. I'm not. First off, right out of the bat, I'm not fear mongering. I use the metaphor of Escape from New York, the movie of our childhood, where Snake Plissken by Kurt Russell is sent in because New York is a prison colony in a dystopian future, and it's all fallen apart, and he's got to get in and get the American president out. And but what we see in the movie is the remnants of a New York that's grand and has been torn down to its absolute molecular level. And what I see in the possibility set for New York right now is you've got truckers who are outraged by what just happened to President Trump in this kangaroo court that was run by Ogeron and Letitia James. And then businesses that are looking at, oh, there's no more rule of law, we have to leave. And so what would happen if we woke up and found out that New York had no items in the grocery stores that could be taken? And what would happen if we had a situation where all the investors and everybody on Billionaire Row said, this is not for me and I'm leaving? Then that future that was described in John Carpenter's 1981 movie wouldn't be so far from the truth. And what I'm very concerned about is New York itself, the leadership, Eric Adams, Kathy Hochul, are doubling down on things that will bring them this. And I'm not even subscribing them to evil. I'm saying that these people are so incompetent, they don't understand that the money that floats New York will go away, and New York could be in a situation where it couldn't feed itself. But Rich, the bigger idea in my article is this is not limited to one city. This can be Atlanta. This can the home of Fannie. This can be Chicago. This can be San Francisco. This can be Denver. That this is the conclusion of what these extremist Marxists and their ideologies have wrought on America's cities and what it leads to.
Folks, we're on with Brigadier General Blaine Holt, and I agree with you. You're not fear-mongering, but it is very sobering when you put thought to this, when you think, man, they can't loot anymore because we've screwed ourselves so badly that they can't loot anymore. That's a horrible scenario. I mean, it's like when communism set in Cuba and people, weren't able to go to the grocery stores anymore because they didn't have any more items. And that's remained like that. A friend of mine is in Cuba right now, and he called me the other day. He went there for the passing of a family member. And he was, he just always reiterates. He's like, oh, yeah, I'll probably talk to you when I get back because there's no internet where I am. He's like, if you're not in Havana near a hotel, you're not getting any Wi-Fi. And it's very difficult to make calls. And he was explaining how, he said, anything I need to fix for maintenance in the house, I've got to bring those tools and products with me because you're not going to find them here. and including food. And he said, they went on this journey. His wife came back before him. They're friends of mine. And she was telling me how they went on this journey looking for food. And, this dystopian picture that you're painting is not far-fetched. And it's very sad that this could happen in the Big Apple or anywhere else. And my thought here is Trump seems to be the only answer that we've got, right? The only person talking about reversing this trend. But there's got to be more than just a single election of one individual. What else is there, General?
So Americans have to absolutely push back now. They have to understand they have enough information to make an assessment. We, as Americans, we're not moved to anger quickly, and we're not moved to action quickly as a group. Historically, that's been our course. But what more information do you need? If the truckers in a perfect storm say, "I'm not going to deliver to New York," and if the investors like Kevin O'Leary or Grant Cardone say New York's not worth investing in anymore, then New York becomes the poster child for what America looks like when we go into steep decline, because that's what will become of New York. Imagine going to a grocery store and not being able to find a head of lettuce. If you recall, in 1987, at the height of the Cold War, just as the Soviet Union was breaking apart, the chief of staff, right after the Cold War was over, the chief of staff of the Russian military came to Washington on a tour of America, and he saw the abundance in our grocery stores. He saw the vibrancy in our societies. He saw all of the things, and he wept openly and publicly in front of all of the TV cameras to say, there's no way we could have beaten America now that I understand what America had. And what he was pointing to was not our weapons. He was pointing to our abundance and our freedom and our society that was fine all by itself. Now, let's get to today. We don't have that today. Right now, we look more like a Moscow grocery store as a metaphor for what we see. And we have a government that's pitted against us in an oppressive way, much the way the crown was pitted against us in 1775.
Wow.
And we're in trouble. We're in trouble. So it gets back to, will we take care of each other locally? That is the key. There is no savior. Website. No one is coming. It's us.
Right. We're it. Let everybody know the website again so they could check out the program and get involved if they're so moved.
Oh, sure. So one is ksrg.org. The other one at the national level, if you want to start your own county guardian program, it's restore-liberty.org. And we will help anybody. We don't care. Left, right, up, down. We're all Americans. We can have our fights later on. That's not important right now. It's important that we come together.
Outstanding, General. As always, I want to thank you for being here. You're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Godspeed to you, General.
Great to be with you. Thank you.
You bet. Folks, we're coming right back. We continue our conversation with you all, plus our calls, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. We continue our conversation, and I want to talk about a documentary, No Farms, No Food, which focuses on the current and upcoming constraints on the agricultural industry and individual farmers as governments begin to force climate change restrictions on farmers all over the place. And obviously this suggests that people should just start eating bugs, right, as food. We've heard that stuff before, but it's taking its toll, and it's getting worse. And Roman Balmakov has produced a documentary, and I want to get his take on what's going on here, because this is definitely not good for any of us. Roman, welcome.
Hey, Rich, great to be on here with you.
Thank you. Tell us a little bit about what inspired you to do this particular documentary.
Yeah, me and my team were seeing all these farmer protests spring up around the world, and I'm sure you and your audience have seen them too. You had
sure
in Germany they were fighting diesel subsidies. In the Netherlands there was a large sort of a forced appropriation scheme that was happening there. In Ireland they were culling cattle. In Sri Lanka there was like sort of just a push against synthetic fertilizer, and so we were seeing these protests and thinking like, it's so strange that the government would be fighting farmers, because you can imagine a government fighting like a sinful industry, like, cracking down on prostitution or drugs or things like that. But when we saw this like global fight of, not an external fight, like an internal fight of governments punishing their own farmers,
right?
We thought there was like something else going on, and so we just began traveling to all these different countries, speaking to the farmers, speaking to any government officials which would be willing to go on record with us, which unfortunately is not that many who are willing to actually justify their stances. But what we were able to find is that even though, like on the surface level, all these different farmers, they're fighting against different things, like different aspects of the agenda, when you trace it back, it all goes back to the UN. To the UN, their Agenda 2030, and the sort of the green policies, which then trickle down from this international level into like concrete, real on-the-ground bureaucratic manifestations in each individual country, given that country's own sort of makeup. So like Sri Lanka, they're a socialist country. And so the president there just overnight just said, hey, no more synthetic fertilizer, and nobody was allowed to use it. Versus like in the Netherlands, they had this agreement in place from the 90s where they could set up nature preserve areas. And so the organizations there, they implemented the policy by just expanding those areas like 100-fold. And here in the U.S., we have the Waters of the U.S. Act, the Endangered Species Act. And so the people who are aligned ideologically with this green agenda, they're using these laws in the U.S. to sort of push farmers out. So it's like one agenda coming from the UN, and it's getting trickled down like a hydra. It's like one body, but many, many heads. So that's sort of what we were able to uncover through our year-long investigation, which manifested in the documentary.
Now, is this the first film you've made, or have you made others?
No, this was my first film. I have a show that I produce on a daily basis, but this was an intense project, a full year of work. Yeah, the first one I've ever made.
Oh, so you're a TV guy that went into documentary filmmaking?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow, cool. And what's been the response to the film thus far?
I mean, thus far it's positive, and I'm actually really glad, because it's one of those things where, like, again, like I know you have a program as well, so it's like, when you put out content on a daily basis, you feel like, okay, well, I can do this research, I can put in this work, and the viewers are watching it, I can see the numbers. But when you spend like a full year making something, it's like, are people actually
hope this
gonna,
thing works?
Like,
yeah,
exactly, yeah. But I'm glad, I meet people all the time. Like even last weekend, I was in CPAC over in Washington D.C. and some lawmakers came to me from I think there was two, one from Wyoming and another one from Minnesota, and they said that they've been showing the documentary at farmer organization meetings there, so they can fight back against these policies at a local level. So that's really heartening.
Folks, we're on with Roman Balmakov. He's the producer of No Farms, No Food. And again, this documentary focuses on the constraints on the agricultural industry. And I've been hearing a lot. I mean, I just saw yesterday the Attorney General of the state of New York, Tish James, who, and she's not going after Trump. She's now going after the biggest meat producers, because they're doing everything they can in the name of climate change. Meanwhile, I know that they say all these things, and you can't do this and you can't do that, and they want to tax every head of cattle at some insane price to drive up the cost of beef. But at the same time, they're allowing foreign beef to come in, and I just don't understand the hustle. I guess it's all about money, because it's not really about eliminating red meat.
Yeah, and that's what we were able to sort of expose to, where, I mean, my understanding of it is like right now at a macro level, there's these two competing ideologies in the world. You have the globalist philosophy of like a real centralized power structure, which sort of supersedes national borders, and you have like these supranational organizations and these like transnational corporations. And so basically like an elite class at the top, which coordinate things globally, of course, all for the greater good of us, right? All for the greater good of the plebeians. But like, directly counter to that, counter to the UN and the World Economic Forum, right now you have these nationalist sort of populist movements springing up across the world, with the farmers being just like the biggest manifestation of that. And like you mentioned, Letitia James. So the way that like the UN and the World Economic Forum policies actually manifest is through things like what she's doing, right? She's the one actually on the ground who aligns with this ideology. And, you know, so you mentioned that, so I'm on her Twitter page right now, and this is what she wrote just the other day. She said, I'm suing one of the largest beef producers in the country. And she says, the beef industry is one of the largest contributors to climate change, and JBS has falsely advertised its commitment to sustainability and endangered our planet. And so it's like she's very obviously, after going after Trump, she's sort of, in my opinion, positioning herself for a gubernatorial run, for a governor's run probably in the next upcoming cycle. And so it's like, politically, this is the move to make, right? It's like to go after the farmers because they're bad for the environment. Meat is bad. And because technology has gotten to this point, you can actually do that. Because back in the day, you could say, well, I'm going to go after farmers. I'm going to, get people to eat less meat. But you couldn't really do it because there was no alternative protein sources. But now you have fake meat, right? You have that industry springing up, and you have edible insect, that industry springing up. And people who are aligned with this ideology, they actually see this as a potential future food source for people to replace the protein if they're to take away the beef and the chicken for the environment. So it's like it's all very interconnected and dystopian if you really start to dig into it.
Roman, when you heard about this, when I heard about this, like the eating of these bugs and insects and whatnot, did your research lead you to a place that shows that these insects have as much protein as a steak?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, it's a per poundage thing, So I mean, they're definitely a source of protein, and like the insect thing is interesting because we weren't necessarily like even thinking that was going to be a theme in the documentary until it just started coming up over and over again. Like, the question is very obvious. Like, if you get rid of all these farmers in order to quote unquote save the planet, like what are people going to eat? And it just kept circling back to insects. You have all these celebrities suddenly promoting insects. The EU is cutting all this red tape and allowing insects to be sold as food. And it's just, it's happening. There's like a large insect plant, actually the largest in the world, that's opening up in Decatur, Illinois. It's going online actually later this year in late 2024. And it's happening. Like, this industry is growing. And one thing I would want to mention is like, I even though it's like very sort of in the milieu to be like against insect eating, like I'm really not. Like, it's a specialty food. If you go to Trader Joe's or Whole Foods right now, you can buy insect chips and cricket chips and grasshoppers and stuff like that. It's a niche market. It's not a big deal if people are interested in it. But I think the problem is that the government and these people who are ideologically aligned with the green movement, they're creating like an economic environment where, like, let's say 30 years from now, you might go to the store and you see, well, the steak, costs, let's say, $74 a pound, whereas the insect alternative to the steak costs $5 a pound, because they've sort of created that economic framework that puts so much restrictions on the farmers and so few restrictions and so many subsidies on the insect producers that, like, families are just sort of forced to eat this alternative meat source. That's I think the future that is more likely to happen.
Roman Balmakov is the producer of the documentary No Farms, No Food. We continue with him straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with Roman Balmakov. He's the producer of the documentary No Farmers, No Food. I had the wrong title in my screen. And Roman, when it comes to a documentary like this that is likely very controversial to some who don't agree or who fear that this information gets out, I know a lot of documentarians have faced censorship over this stuff. Did you have any issues in distributing the film?
Distributing it, I would say no. I mean, you know, yeah, we built our own platform. It's called Epic TV. We built it out because we were censored for other topics on YouTube, and so because of that, we were able to just host it ourselves. And yeah, I mean, it's gotten like 3.3 million views thus far, and yeah, so I guess not.
So if people want to watch it, where do they go?
So you know what? We were able to snatch up an excellent domain. They can go to nofarmersnofood.com.
Great. That's easy enough, right? Go to nofarmersnofood.com. And once they get there, they can do what they've got to do, watch the documentary, download it, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or just watch it. It looks like they get to watch it for free?
Oh, yeah. Just I think if they give us their email, they can watch it for free, yeah.
Wow. That's awesome. Now, with a project like this, does it, you said a year and a half, and it sounds like a right amount of time. Do you foresee yourself doing another one that would be this intense?
I mean, potentially. It just kind of depends on if there's a topic that sort of needs it. Because on my program, which is Facts Matter, for anyone that is interested, you can find it on YouTube.
Yeah, let everybody know where they could find it.
It's if you just go into YouTube and you type Facts Matter, like FACTS Matter, yeah, you can find it on there. It's a good channel in my own opinion. But yeah, with a documentary, what I really feel is like you can cover a topic multidimensionally and really in greater depth, and just so much better and so much deeper than you could with a daily show. But the other side of that coin is that it's difficult. It takes a lot of travel, a lot of manpower, and so yeah. I mean, with the farmers, there's a ton of developments that have happened since we put out the documentary a few months ago. Like the EU headquarters over in Brussels, it's surrounded by farmers who are just dumping manure on it and just blockading the roads because the agricultural ministers of Europe are meeting, and they're just sick of it. They're just so tired. They're doing what they're doing. Looks like a war zone, actually. So yeah, I mean, it definitely could have a follow up.
And let everybody know how they can continue to follow the work that you're doing. Because again, for anybody who doesn't know, Roman has a lot of different stuff that he covers on his daily program, and this documentary is specifically about farmers and food. But you've covered a number of topics, and I've seen you had some great coverage of like Russiagate and whatnot a couple of years back. So tell everybody how they can follow you.
Yeah, I mean, simply if you have a YouTube account or you're on there, just head on over to Facts Matter. You can find the channel, or head on over to Epic TV. That's Epic TV, EPOCHTV.com. I put stuff on there, like extra episodes on there that are not unfortunately welcome on YouTube. They're still completely fact-based and everything is properly sourced. It's just, YouTube has an algorithm that basically crawls whatever you say. And if you talk about, things that are not in line with their ideological framework, they can kick you off, throttle the video. Yeah.
Isn't that how it is? All right,
yeah.
Roman, I want to thank you for being here. I want you to send our best to everybody over at Epic. Got some good people over there like Yanya Kellick and Cindy Drew Kier and yourself and many others. And you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. And keep up the good work.
Rich, thank you so much. And I know you're here in the New York area. If you're ever in Manhattan, come visit us. We'd love to show you around the studio.
I will. I'll take you up on that offer. I'll do it real soon, actually. Talk with you real soon, and hope you'll come back soon.
Bye.
You got it, brother. All right, folks, we continue with your phone calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-4700. 5337 833 4Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. So we're talking about farmers. We're talking about so many things that we talked about, right? Earlier, I was talking about the 70th anniversary of the attack on the U.S. Capitol by 4 Puerto Rican nationalists led by Lolita Lebron, who today is still celebrated as a freedom fighter, as if she's a hero. Again, I look at her as a terrorist. But this is the beauty of life, right? That there are so many people that see things so differently on every side of the aisle. And it's interesting because my brother, well, I have a bunch of brothers, but one of my brothers, he loves to partake in what everybody calls conspiracy theories. And he's very well informed on lots of things, but he just loves this stuff, and every day, I get one or many text messages about make sure you have cash on hand, make sure you have gold, make sure you're ready to go with silver because the financial system is going to collapse. And I have no doubt in my mind that we're all probably going to see some sort of financial issues arise. When, I don't know, because, I'm not an economist and I'm not a fortune teller. But I can tell you, when we look at the way our government works and the way we spend money, and it's inevitable, in my opinion, right? How do we maintain the system that we have? I'd say it's nearly impossible to maintain the system that we have. Why? Well, because we spend all this money. We don't create any money other than the printing of money and the taxation of money, right? The I don't want to say theft, but, the government takes your money and they spend it for you. So how then, how do you prepare? Well, obviously you need to be prepared one way or another. But my I guess the crux of it here is that I feel if you say every day there's going to be a financial collapse, and he's been saying this, I don't know, since 2017, and it hasn't happened yet. Now, my response to him is, it's likely going to happen one day, but I'm not going to sit here and wait for it like you are. Be as prepared as you can be, but I'm not going to not take a trip because it might happen that weekend, or I'm not going to not do this or not do that, because that's just crazy. Now I'm allowing the fear to control me. That's exactly what our enemies would want. Right? So I bring that up to say that there's so many people that believe in this stuff. And they believe that, Biden's not really the president. Look, I believe that Biden may not be calling the shots, but he's definitely the president. Anyway, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about everything we've talked about tonight and all of your calls. Looking forward to a very, very, let's call it robust open phone America tonight. So everything is on the table. 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. I'll be right back in about 7.5 minutes.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to hour number 3 on our Friday night program. Our phone number, if you want to join the late night national town hall conversation, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ, and plenty to discuss tonight. Just a couple of things. An Alaskan fisherman found a crashed, you guessed it, spy balloon that was hovering over Alaska. This seems to be the trend. Now we've got a little update on Senator Bob Menendez on this program. He's known as Gold Bar Bob. And Gold Bar Bob has a co-defendant who has pled not guilty in his bribery case. Biden announces, who cares about, he just, if you don't know about me, you ain't black. Right? Let's see. What else we got here? The CDC ends the 5-day isolation for COVID. Good. Oregon legislature votes to recriminalize drugs. I think that's a good idea. And there's a couple of more that I want to get to. There's really a few good ones in here tonight that are really, really interesting that I'm going to get to in a moment. But I wanted to recap a little bit of what we discussed tonight so far, because we had a lot of interesting conversations tonight. We started off the evening with a conversation about the media, right? The Supreme Court has agreed to take Trump's immunity case, and this is a big deal that has kind of just set the ball in motion for all things left, right? Everybody on the left within the media, the left within academia, the left everywhere, they are now full speed ahead on the attack on the Supreme Court because they know the court's job is to interpret the law as it's written. And it's clear what the law says. It makes no sense in the world for Trump to be adjudicated prior to this election. He announced he was running before they announced they were investigating him. So shame on them for not bringing this case before he decided to run for president. That's on them, not on him. Now, what I'll say to that is they know how this is likely going to end up for Trump because they knew it was BS from the beginning. So what ends up happening, now everybody's going to take shots to discredit and malign the court. One of the articles I saw, and I was sharing this earlier, is a piece about why questioning, we're questioning why we should have lifetime appointments. Now, you could question whatever you want, right? It's like going to work and, you work a 9 to 5 and you go there and you start thinking out loud, maybe even thinking with your boss, saying, why is it that we do this whole 9 to 5 thing? Like, why don't we just do like a 10 to 6? Or why don't I just do whatever I want when I'm here, and then the rest of the time I could do when I'm at home? And I'm sure some people think that's appropriate in today's world, but many people think you do as you're told at work, and that's the job. The job is to do what your boss wants you to do. And these are just, I guess, differences of ideology and opinion. But that's where we are. There's an attack on the Supreme Court because it's likely going to side with Trump. They're saying it's completely corrupt. The court is corrupt because it's doing its job. All right? And same thing they said when the court decided that it was bad law, Roe v. Wade. So all that being said, we talked about that. Then we had some additional conversation, right? We had a little bit of a talk moving on from the media to how to be better prepared in the event of a community emergency with General Blaine Holt. And we also talked about how things aren't as great as, Biden would like us to believe that they are, and what that looks like in America. And, how this used to be the stuff of Hollywood movies, but we're actually seeing these things happen. And, of course, we talked with Roman Balmakov from Epic Times, who is the producer of the documentary No Farmers, No Food. And that was very eye-opening. It's how they're pushing people to eat bugs, saying that's how you get your protein. And if you get your protein from bugs, then you don't need to eat steak anymore because steaks are bad for you because farming or being a cattle rancher is bad for the environment. And I think that's insanity. But it seems like there's a big sinister plan to control the food supply. And in particular, there's been an attack on fossil fuels. There's an attack on methane and cow farts. There's an attack on animal protein. Just eating any animal is it's horrible to the left. And this is problematic for many people. So we're going to talk about that as well. And I want to get to your calls before we take the first break. Let me see. Let's go to Joni. Joni's calling us from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania on KDKA, America's oldest radio station. Joni, welcome to the program. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yeah. I don't think I would eat bugs.
Good for you. I don't think I would eat them either. Why not? Is it not your type of thing, or you don't think you'd like the taste?
It's not my type of thing.
Mine either. Now, should the situation with beef become very difficult, more expensive, harder to get, do you think that would change your mind and make it more appetizing?
No.
What about if we put it in soup, kind of like beans, maybe like a bug soup?
No.
We're not selling you on the bugs, huh? Well, what do you think overall with this idea of eating bugs? Do you think it is going to be a popular alternative to meat, given the government's push and their interconnection with so many corporations? Do you think they'll be able to convince people that they're better off eating bugs than eating beef?
No.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think anybody's going to buy it. But you know what? I've seen these crazy people that have gone from saying, you know what, we're no longer taking showers every day because we heard that it ruins a layer of your skin, to people saying that they want to eat bugs. And, to each his own is all I could say. Joni, thank you for the call. Nice to hear your voice. Big shout out to everybody listening on KDKA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And let's see. We continue with your calls and more straight ahead. The phone number, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue with your discussion on everything and your calls. I want to go to Sue in Schwenksville, Pennsylvania, WXDE. Sue, what are your thoughts?
Well, regarding the insect thing, I think most people would not knowingly eat insects. But if you eat strawberry yogurt or yogurt that's pink, you're already eating dried insects, because they use a coloring that's extracted from the dried, pulverized bodies of something called cochineal insects. It gives fruit-flavored yogurt their pink color.
Wow. I didn't know anything about this. So it's not strawberries that make it pink?
No, I don't think so. It says here. And I found several sources for this. When I was going to call you, I thought, let me find one. And there's lots and lots of articles about it. This one is from UPI News, whatever that is. And they talk in here about that. It says, Michael F. Jacobson, Executive Director of the Center for Science and the Public Interest in Washington, said Dannon uses carmine, a dye extracted from the dried, pulverized bodies of cochineal insects, to give fruit-flavored yogurt their pink color. The dye is used in the strawberry flavor of Dannon's Oikos brand of Greek yogurt, 2 flavors of Dannon's Light and Fit, and Breed use the extract, as do 6 of the Activia yogurts. It says here they also use natural coloring such as purple carrot juice in their Danimals line of yogurts. But yeah, there's insects in the pink yogurt.
You learn something new every day. Sue, this is crazy. Now, I want to get your take on a couple of things, because we haven't spoken with you in a while, and there's so much that's gone on. We had Dr. Phil on yesterday, and he mentioned Brandon Judd, and Brandon Judd was at the border with President Trump in that dueling press conference that he had with Joe El Baboso Biden. And Joe, was talking about climate change at the border, and Trump was talking about the murder of Laken Riley, the college student that's the same age as my daughter. And I just can't wrap my head around, who is it that gives Biden this advice? What's your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. They're giving him very bad advice. And not just at the border, but this little incident where Seth Meyers took him to get ice cream. And, the pictures of Biden eating the ice cream and Seth Meyers, you can see Meyers is it's almost like he's enjoying humiliating the guy. I mean, who tells him that that's a good idea? People can't afford groceries, and he's walking around having ice cream and stuff. I mean, it's a let them eat cake moment, if you ask me. Yeah, and I did hear that Dr. Phil interview. Yeah, that was excellent when you had him on.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I appreciate that, Sue. And I think you're right. I think that's the consensus is that Biden's out of his mind. And I don't know. I'm trying to convince myself that there's no way that he can win, but I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet, and I hope I get there. Anyway, I appreciate your call. Let's see. We continue. Let us go to Michigan and check in with Jeff. Jeff's calling from Lansing, Michigan on WILS. Jeff, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
It's great to talk to you again, Mr. Valdez, and that's Valdez with an S, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, you're a good listener, sir.
Yes. But talking about this food thing, now I've been on this kick for a long time, and I buy survival food. I hoard things like beans, pasta items, but you know what I mean? And I've been stocking up on this stuff for a long time. What concerns me the most is there are so many people. Well, plus I'm a hunter and a fisherman and an outdoors kind of guy. What concerns me the most is there are so many people, especially in the big cities, they don't have these skills or they don't have the ability to, go out and get their own food. And that's where the chaos is just going to break out. I mean, if the excrement hits the fan, and then that's where, all this, I think, murder, total chaos would take place. And if the store shelves get empty, they have nowhere to go. They have no idea what to do with that situation.
Yeah. Listen, I think you're right in the sense that people can get caught with their pants down, so to speak, right? And you don't want that to happen. But if you don't have any, like you mentioned, if you're not prepared with, whether it's the meals that are ready to eat or, a supply of water and canned goods or whatever, whatever your plan is, you can get caught with your pants down. You don't want to get caught by surprise in a situation where you're stuck. And, again, being in the radio business as a broadcaster, we typically have a backup plan and even sometimes a backup plan to our backup plan, but not always that thought out, right? And I think that's how we all need to kind of be prepared with everything in life, not just, an over-the-air broadcast, but you name it, be ready. And I think General Holt would be in agreement with you where he said, make sure if anything you can fill it. So whether it's your gas tank, your medications, prescriptions, whatever it is, just, stay on top of things. It will never hurt you to be prepared. And like I told him, the worst thing that could happen is you never need this stuff. And that's not such a bad outcome. Anyway, thank you for your call, Jeff. I appreciate hearing from you. Big shout out to everybody in Lansing, Michigan on WILS. Let us continue. Let's go to Paul. Paul's in Zanesville, Ohio. Paul, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Hey, good evening, Rich. As far as what Sue said, I think that's why I never really did like yogurt. Okay. And I'm sure as to heck not going to eat any bugs. I mean, unless it comes down to, you have such good callers that it triggered something in my mind that Jim Bohannon had a show with a couple of survivalists. They was bear hunters. But anyway, back to what I was saying. Yeah. And, whoever looked at a lobster and said, that looks good to eat, So you just never know. Yeah, you might have to come down to that. But I, as far as me, I'm old enough now to where no, I'm not eating anything like that. I'm a steak and potato guy. So I had something else to say, but daggone it, when you listen to some of your callers, you get your mind boggled a little bit because they're so good. And you're doing an excellent job, Rich. I wanted to tell you that.
I appreciate that, Paul.
I like Dr. Phil, too. That Dr. Phil, he says the same thing. He echoes Larry Elder. He really does.
I agree. They have they're talking about similar things especially when it comes to protecting the family. And listen, we should all sound that way, right? I think that would be key for all of us to make sure that we sound that way. Paul, I think you made a point that was pretty interesting to me. You said, who would have thought that looking at a lobster would go, hey, that looks good to eat? And you're right. It's got claws. It's brown or red, depending on where you're getting it. And it looks like it'll bite you and whatnot. But, once you boil it and it screams and it's done screaming and it's boiled and it's good and it's cooked and it's drowned in butter, my goodness, how delicious, right? And, it made me think, if we boil the crickets enough, will they taste like lobster? I don't think so, right? But, I guess I can't knock it till I try it. And now I feel bad about that because I don't want to eat bugs, but I'm eventually going to have to try it. Anyway, I appreciate it, Paul. Big shout out to everybody listening on WHIZ. And when we come back, I want to get to the rest of your calls. We've got calls from Delaware, from Idaho, from Ohio, and more that are coming in. The phone number again, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And something I wanted to mention to you was I wanted to circle back to the thought that I had earlier. Two things I want to circle back on, at least touch on before we go. There's a couple of stories, so three things, a couple of stories that I need to reiterate with you. And there's also the I just wanted to, again, in this third hour, just kind of circle back on the idea that today is the 70th anniversary that 4 Puerto Rican nationalists terrorized the United States Capitol. And they did it in the name of collectivism, of communist sympathies. And I think this is a problem and one that we need to not forget so that we don't repeat that history. Anyway, we're coming back and we're going to discuss the New World Order and a whole lot more. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
The Oregon Senate has voted to pass a bill to recriminalize drugs in the state. Now, the bill passed through the House earlier this week. Hard drugs were decriminalized after voters approved Measure 110 back in 2020, but that rollout has been widely criticized. A lot of people blaming Oregon's and Portland's drug crisis on Measure 110.
Now, again, this is just something that I can't help but laugh at. Right? I mean, how could you not laugh at something like this? And again, I don't mean to laugh at, any of the misfortune that, may have occurred from drug use and abuse and overdose. But come on. Measure 110, it's nearing its end as the legislature sends a bill to recriminalize this. This is crazy, right? Why did you decriminalize public drug use in the first place? It was a stupid experiment. It's clearly a failed experiment. The Oregon, and it's not Oregon, it's Oregon. But the Oregon Senate, I'm from New York, we get to say that, passed this bill, 4002, on a 21-8 vote with support from both Democrats and Republicans. Well, of course, nobody wants to see, in Spanish they call them tecatos, right? These guys, these baseheads, the drug addicts, doing what they do, getting high in the middle of the street. So now it's going to go to the desk of Governor Tina Kotek, who has declined to say whether she supports the bill or not. I mean, this is just crazy. The whole thing is crazy to me. Why on earth you would allow this? Among the many provisions that the House Bill 4002 offers, it also expands access to medications that are used to treat opioid withdrawal, creates new addiction services facilities, and makes it easier for prosecutors to seek steeper penalties for drug dealers. With the bill, we're doubling down on our commitment to make sure Oregonians have access to treatment and the care that they deserve and need. That's Senate Majority Leader Kate Lieber. She's a Democrat out of Portland. She co-wrote the bill. Lieber argued that House Bill 4002 will be the start of real and transformative change for our justice system. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. The real change for your justice system is when you decriminalized public drug use and you created a scenario where people were just getting high in the streets. And it became so bad that you had to change your stupid law and do it in the name of we're trying to get people help. No, you're full of it. You're fake, you're phony, and you're a fraud. Unbelievable. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this and more. Let's see. Where do we go? We go to Akron, Ohio, WNIR, and check in with Peggy. Peggy, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez. Tell me, Peggy, do you think it was a good idea for the folks in Oregon or even the folks in Seattle to decriminalize public drug use?
Oh, I am shaking my head. It's sad. It's really sad because they're not helping the addicts or the addicts' families or any of the people who have been touched and hurt by decriminalizing something like that.
I'm with you.
Sad.
Very sad. It's a horrible thing. And I'm glad that they're recriminalizing it. But, I mean, what was the sense in doing it in the first place? It seems to me like some people on the extreme radical left are really just extreme and radical. I mean, that's crazy to think that we don't want to get people in trouble. We don't want to hurt them, so we're going to allow them to get high in the middle of the park where kids go to play, where people have their lunch, people who aren't addicts. I mean, since when do we have to change the way we live and change the way our children live to accommodate the people that are afflicted? I mean, I thought that's why we had hospitals and rehab facilities and whatnot. Whole thing is warped. Now, Peggy, I know you heard our conversation about bugs. What are your thoughts on eating bugs to replace meat?
My mother traveled the world, and my mom used to say that people everywhere ate bugs. She said, we don't eat bugs in this country, but apparently we do in our yogurt.
That's so funny. You know, I'm sure we've all eaten a bug here and there, you know, inadvertently. And I know I've seen Fear Factor and other shows where, you know, in other places, people do eat bugs. But I think that, you know, I thought these were the first world problems that I liked having, the idea that we could have a lifestyle where we could eat a piece of a cow rather than eating a bug, right?
If I was really hungry, I would want a bug, Rich.
Now, would you take the bug with condiments? Would it sauteed, stewed, fried, raw? How would you do it?
I don't know. Ranch dressing.
It's like ranch and cheese, right? You could put that stuff on anything and it'll work out. Oh, that's terrific. I love that. Peggy, I want to thank you for your call. That really put a smile on my face. That was funny. Ranch dressing, Akron, Ohio, WNIR. Peggy, call back anytime. We're going to get to your calls right now. We got a few people on hold, and I have not forgotten you. We're working our way in order of appearance. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, we continue with your calls and more. Let's go let's go to Lori. She's in Decatur, Illinois on WCRA. Lori, go right ahead. You're on with Rich Valdez.
Yep, I listen to you guys all the time, and I really appreciate how honest you guys are when you're talking and educational, just one end to the other. And I was calling in because I had taken my nephews to, like, Brooklyn Zoo, and it was like bug week or whatever, but they had crickets there or grasshoppers. I don't know which one. I think they're more crickets. But they had them dried, and then they had, like, barbecue and ranch, dried seasoning on top of them.
Wow.
And my nephews ate them. They said they just tasted like chips. They were crunchy, but I couldn't make myself do it.
Huh. Yeah, it does sound kind of gross, but I'm wondering if that's a new source of protein that I might be writing off. That's crazy, Lori, and I appreciate the compliment and for you listening. I always appreciate everybody that listens to the live show and everybody that's listening on delay. I know in some markets you guys get us at like 3 a.m. I'm happy to be on at 3 a.m. as well. And if you ever want to call the show during the live part of the show, you know the number, 833-4-VALDEZ. Lori, thank you for your call. Big shout out to everybody in Decatur, Illinois, where they recently threw Trump off the ballot in Illinois. Lori, before you go, did you hear that there's some innuendo out there that the judge that took Trump off of the Illinois ballot was a traffic court judge? Have you heard about that?
No, I haven't, but I'm definitely going to do some checking into that.
Yeah, I haven't confirmed it myself, but I did see an initial report of that, and I said, that can't be a traffic court judge. It shouldn't be any judge. I mean, that's already been kind of handled, but I guess once the Supreme Court handles that, they won't be doing that anymore. But it's and I thought they had already gone in that direction. But either way, I think you and me both need to open our minds to the world of bugs with ranch dressing. And find out more about this traffic court judge. Lori, thank you for your call. And before we get to the next call, I wanted to make a quick announcement. This is just a point of personal privilege. My daughter, she's 18 years old, and she was just named Employee of the Month in one of her 2 jobs. So I want to congratulate my little Chachi because I'm very, very proud of her, and I love her very much. So congratulations to her. And let's continue. Let's go to Doc. Doc is in Wilmington, Delaware. Let's talk about all sorts of crazy things going on in the world, Doc.
Yes. I want to thank you for being on the air. Thank you for taking my call. And I want to thank you for covering the New World Order, as you've done so beautifully over your past several shows, going back several months now. You're the only guy that's doing it on major media, except for Glenn Beck. You and Glenn Beck are my main guys in the New World Order. It exists. It's existed for a long time, and now it's coming out in the open. They want to rule us. They want to take away American sovereignty, and you are fighting for freedom, my man, of every person on the planet.
You're not lying. Let me tell you a little story. So, again, I'd heard a lot of bad things about the UN, and I said, let me see for myself. I'm a see for yourself kind of guy. I'm very hard-headed. And there was an organization called the United Nations Association. And I joined this group and got involved to learn more about the sustainable development goals and all of the things that they were doing. And at first, everything comes across as what it is. You know, they want water in, you know, places that don't have water. They want, you know, in countries where they're beating women and like Iran, where they're killing them because they're not wearing their burqa right, you know, or the hijab, I should say. They, you know, they were there in a humanitarian manner trying to put an end to these things. However, just like everything else, right, we have laws on the books in the United States that say if you're seeking asylum, you must seek asylum in the country closest to you that does not present a threat. And most people don't follow that at all, and they skip one country, they skip two countries, they'll skip as many countries as they need to until they get to Texas. And they're at the United States border, and now they're like, yeah, I'm seeking asylum. Well, I mean, that's not even how it works. Even the international part of it doesn't work that way. So it's clear to me that just because you have laws on the books doesn't mean that you're going to follow those laws. And when it comes to the stuff that I learned at the UN, there's a lot of well-intentioned people that are, you know, pro saving the world through the environment, that are just, you know, very, very progressive-minded liberals. And they're not bad people per se, but there are people at the UN and higher in private industry and others in government all over the world that they use this as a front, as a ruse to get the buy-in of unsuspecting people that really mean well. And that's how they do it. And they'll say things like it's in the name of climate change and we're doing this. And they won't mention how, you know, how detrimental it really is to the people. And I learned more and I learned more. And I'm not going to say everybody that's at the UN is some sort of sinister bad guy. But I will say that these sustainable development goals and Agenda 2030 and the previous agenda, these are things that can definitely be contorted into something else for power grabs and to, like you said, to minimize or eliminate the sovereignty of any nation so that they could integrate the UN and the multiple agencies that they represent more easily into other governments. And some governments appreciate that because they need the support. And I think there's others that, like ours, that want to be more independent and more sovereign and will make the choices accordingly as to where, you know, they're going to be involved. So I say all of that to say, in fairness, not everybody's a crazy Klaus Schwab type of lefty at the UN. And I've been to the General Assembly a couple of times for this annual group gathering. And I've even been to Congress, you know, I'm not going to say lobbying, but finding out if they were on board, especially during the Trump years. That was when I first started, I think 2017, 2018, 2019 maybe was probably the last year I was involved in that. And I did it because Trump was in the White House, and at the time he was saying things like, we're going to stop funding for the UN. And I thought, interesting, right? This is a potentially a good thing, because if we don't fund the UN, we're the biggest funder of the UN, then the UN is in effect, you know, I'm not going to say a paper tiger at that point, but a lot less effective. And they don't have their own military, but they have people donating military to them. So I learned a lot. And in saying that, there are, like I said, there's people that will prostitute anything that was meant for good and use it for bad. And I think that's what we see at the UN. And that's why I'm happy to talk about it in whatever capacity I'm able to talk about it, you know, from a position of knowledge or authority or whatever. I'm happy to do that if I have some knowledge about it. And the stuff I don't know about, you know, I ask our wonderful guests, because I think it's important that we realize that these groups like the UNRWA, right, the UN refugee whatever group that ultimately had members in it that were pro-Hamas and anti-Israeli. And, you know, this anti-Semitic type of move is not a good thing, but it was well known. And it happened again. So my point is, yes, we have to be vigilant, and we have to be aware, Doc.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'm glad you brought that up, and I thank you for your compliment. But before you go, Doc, I want to get your thoughts on, you know, the New World Order and the way that the UN Agenda 2030 is playing out for people that are just trying to get their own way?
Well, we have to fight this thing politically, not just with us as Americans. We have to integrate with other nations of like mind. Examples, you talked about the farmers. Mm-hmm. We have to make the farmers of the world unite under our aegis. That we weren't born to be the world's policemen. We were born to be the world's firemen, to put out fires, okay? In my thinking, Rich, and I want your thoughts on my thoughts, we should unite with farmers all over the globe, Sri Lanka, the Netherlands, Poland, everywhere, France, the Netherlands, who want to fight this darn stuff and unite with them, with our farmers and their farmers, and then put the UN out of business on this kind of garbage.
Well, listen, I like the idea of the UN being put out of business. My thought there is that ultimately the UN is like a clearinghouse for the bribes that we give to other countries that we call foreign aid in order for them to stay in line with us. And if you don't stay in line, then you get military intervention. I think that's the way it's always kind of worked. I don't think that we can continue to do that because we're in a different space now. That's number one. Number two, sure, farmers, why not unite them? We should have, whether they're united or not, I think let them communicate. Let them have the ability to be together. That's a given. And ultimately, I think we just need to watch out with what we're doing and not fund the UN so that we're back in control. Because the last thing you want to do is fund your enemies. We're seeing how that plays out now, and it's never a good idea. Doc in Wilmington, Delaware on WDEL. Thank you, sir. Have a great weekend. Folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, this is a mega fast speed round. Hopefully we get it all in. But what I was going to say to Doc before we wrapped up that call was that I don't care who organizes what, but we have to remember the calls of Eva Peron, right? Workers of the world unite. And whether it's workers or farmers, we've got to be careful about creating a new type of, revolt against the bourgeoisie. And it's a repeat of that playbook. Anyway, let's see. We've got 3 calls and I can't get to them all. I'm going to start with one and see how fast we can go. Let's go to Bloomington, Illinois, WHOW. Becky, we have seconds to go. Go right ahead.
I want to give you the laugh for the night. AOC was on one night and she was running off her mouth about how cows fart and pass out into the ozone and they're ruining it for us. Her answer to this, all out crazy now, her answer was put a cork.
Put a cork in it. Love that. Becky, thank you. Paul in Idaho, Sarah in Indiana. I appreciate you guys. We'll chat again on Monday. Take care, good night, and God bless you, America. Hasta la próxima. I am Rich Valdez.